The mid-year version of Home Assistant is here, and I've been going through what we're getting in this 2026.6 release. There's lots of great features here, some specifically in answer to community feedback, and others that whether you're new to Home Assistant or you've been using it for a while, I just know you're going to be pleased to see it. So come with me as I step through everything you need to know about this release before you decide to upgrade. Hey everyone, my name's Simon and welcome to Bite of Geek, a channel that's all about Home Assistant and smart home technology. So the new 2026.6 release of Home Assistant is here, and with this release we've got a whole range of updates to the system, including updates based on community feedback, and one update that I didn't expect to see. There's some great new functionality in this release, and as ever, an awesome list of integrations to help you bring even more of your devices into your smart home. As I always mention, this is a beta release of Home Assistant, and as such it can be subject to change before the final release, with features potentially dropped or added at the last minute. I'll put a link to the release notes in the description of this video if you want to read about the update in more detail. But let's kick things off and look at what's in store for the June release of Home Assistant. Starting off with the new features then, and we have a new approach to adding cards to our dashboards. If you've been using Home Assistant for a while, you're likely very familiar with what card to use, and maybe you just stick with a handful. Or when you go to select a card, you're doing that based on the device you had in mind. For new users though, this scrolling through the various options available isn't exactly user-friendly. They're looking for lights or switches, not entities, buttons and markdown cards, and so when you go to add a light for your living room, you'll get presented with cards for a light, and shades will get a cover card and so on. Along with that, you'll get a preview of what that card is going to look like right there in front of you before you choose to add the card. The old way of selecting cards is still going to be there, it's just this is a more user-friendly way that's just going to be the default and is just another improvement in line with the changes that we've seen over the last year. Next up, and when infrared was introduced in Home Assistant a couple of months ago, it was very much a one-way system of communication, which was very different to when the RF communication was added in the last release, and apparently there's been a lot of community feedback requesting infrared to have the same level of functionality. So in this release, the infrared platform now has a new receiver event entity. Obviously this is going to be dependent on the integration and what that does, but now it can pick up events in Home Assistant, and in this release the LG infrared integration is the first one that is going to be using this. What that means for you is that Home Assistant can now keep sync with the original remote, and you can turn an old infrared remote into a Home Assistant controller and trigger scenes and run scripts all without any extra hardware. Now, this might be the first release in quite a few months where we aren't getting any new purpose-specific triggers or conditions. However, we still do get some nice little tweaks here and there. So first of all, every trigger and condition now has its own dedicated documentation, complete with examples, options, and the fine detail you need to know about. Secondly, in the automation editor, those little pills that show you what's being targeted will now have the number of devices that it's going to target. It's a small improvement, but does help you validate what your intentions are. And finally, and I think this is well overdue, but it is something that's really welcome, now you can add notes to any step of your automation. Just click on the three dots and select notes, and then you can type in what you need to remember. And now you have a little note icon alongside your automation step. Obviously, for simple automations, I think this has got less value, but for those complex ones, it's great to be able to refer back to whatever you were thinking about when you revisit automations years down the line. next, and that is that the weather tile card has now got temperature forecast and precipitation forecast options available, automatically picking the best level of forecast detail that your weather provider offers. And there's updates to the media player tile card as well, which brings a bunch of new features, including a mute button on both the volume slider and volume buttons. You've got extra shuffle, repeat, volume up and down, and mute controls that can be mixed in alongside the playback feature, and a filter for the source and sound mode drop downs. Very handy if you've got a receiver that reports lots of inputs when in reality you only use a couple of them. Some of you may well have seen the changes introduced for Matter-based locks a couple of months ago, and if you're using a Z-Wave smart lock, then you might have been wondering when you were going to get the same level of functionality. Well, this release sees those improvements now being added, allowing you to add, edit and remove users along with their PIN codes, all without having to use the original app for the lock. Finally, for the new features, we have the apps page, which has had a bit of a brush up. So now instead of just a list of boxes, we now have boxes with a running status as well. Such a small change, but it brings it up to date with how things work elsewhere. Not only that, but when you click on an app, then the details page has had a bit of a shuffle around as well. You've got the same information, but it just makes it a bit more modern looking. Overall then, I think these are some great new features in this release, and if you agree, then don't forget to hit the like button down below. Integrations are one of the main reasons people use Home Assistant, giving us the ability to connect together a huge range of devices and services from different manufacturers into our smart home, and therefore it's important to keep up with the latest updates each month. So make sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss my next video. But starting things off then, and if you've got a AI.Wi-Fi smart bulb, well, now you can control them directly and locally from Home Assistant, doing away with the need for cloud communication. If you're an owner of a Sentry Connect My propane tank, well, there's a new integration in this release that lets you connect to the Sentry Connect cloud service to expose the level and status of the tanks equipped with a My Propane monitor. So now there's no excuse for running out of propane with all those new notifications you'll be able to set up in Home Assistant. Those with a CELO smart air conditioner and heat pump controller can now integrate them with Home Assistant via the Cloud API and get access to device entities so that you can adjust modes and temperatures. Data Grand Leon is a nice new integration that brings the open data from the City of Leon, giving you access in Home Assistant to things like track departure times as well as real-time bike and dock availability. Owners of Guntomatic wood and pellet heaters can now monitor them locally within Home Assistant, as it now reads data entirely locally over your network rather than going out to the cloud. Following its introduction in the last release, there's now a new LG TV via serial integration, giving you a reliable connection over the RS-232 port for older televisions or similar devices with smart functionality. And building on the IR functionality recently introduced, owners of Marantz amplifiers will now be able to control them with any IR transmitter that you've got already set up in Home Assistant. We have a new Mitsubishi Comfort integration just in time for those of you going into the warmer months of the year. So now your ductless mini split heat pumps and air conditioning systems can now be controlled in Home Assistant directly over your local network, making them nice and quick to control. The Kumo Cloud is still required, but only for initial device discovery and retrieving credentials. If you've got an Uman EH800 heating controller, well, this release lets you connect that with Home Assistant and control it locally with climate, number, select, sensor and valve entities. So lots of flexibility there to allow you to automate your heating system. One now for those using AI, and this is a new OVH Cloud AI endpoint integration which adds conversation agents to Home Assistant, enabling you to be able to use an LLM from a catalogue of those available with Assist to control your smart home. If you have a PAJ GPS device, well, there's a new integration that allows you to create a tracker entity for each of those trackers in your account and then track them on the map in Home Assistant, or set up things like notifications when the tracker arrives or leaves a zone. Owners of PT level water sensors will find there's a new integration called PT devices that will allow you to get notifications when your water tanks run low or if there's an unexpected usage. So now you can create some useful automations to turn off pumps when there's an issue. And one that I'm personally going to be trying out is the new Samsung infrared integration that lets you use any IR transmitter you've already got set up in Home Assistant to control your TV in the same way that the new Marantz integration does. If you've got a Hayward branded pool controller, well, there's a new Vista Pool integration which will now let you control various devices via the official cloud API, giving you real-time push updates and no polling, so everything should be super responsive. Finally, we have a new Yoto integration which will give you the ability to control your Yoto audio players from within Home Assistant via the official cloud, with updates coming back via MQTT for nice quick updates back into Home Assistant. Those then are the new integrations in this release, but as always, we've got quite a few improvements to existing ones. I'm not going to go through them all as there is quite a few. Instead, I'll just pick out some of the key ones, starting with the Shelly integration, and that now exposes a new occupancy binary sensor. If you've got a Reolink battery camera, well, the integration has been updated to no longer wake them up when Home Assistant checks the privacy mode status, which in turn should prolong battery life. SwitchBot has had quite a big update this release, and I know people have been commenting about when further updates were coming. So there's support for the permanent outdoor light, weather station, and Lock Vision Pro and Lock Pro, as well as the Meter CO2 also having an update to display a time offset number entity. And finally, the air purifier now exposes its LED settings. Google Nest users can now script their thermostat's fan timer right in Home Assistant, and Unify Protect users now have a new alarm profile select entity, so now you can switch between profiles directly within Home Assistant. Those with Cambridge audio receivers will no doubt be happy to hear that there is now a new volume limit that's been exposed, allowing you to prevent overly loud playback. Omi EV chargers get some new controls with a state of charge input and a solar boost switch. The Cube heat pump integration has a new water heater entity for domestic hot water control, along with switches for summer mode, heating curve and heating demand, amongst other things. And finally, SATEL Integra alarm zones now expose the temperature sensors. That's just a handful of the integrations that have been updated this month, but if you want to read the full list of improvements, then don't forget to check out the link in the description of this video. This release, we've got just a handful of integrations moving up the quality scale. So starting off, we have 4 integrations reaching platinum level, and they are Casper Glow, IndieVault, Tailwind and Uptime Robot. We have 1 integration moving to gold, and that is Novi Cooker Hood. Likewise, we have 1 moving to silver, and that is Jandy Eye Aqualink. And finally, we have 2 integrations that move to bronze, and those are Nobo Eco Hub and Zeva Solar. It's great to see new names appearing on this list, as well as some familiar ones moving up each month due to the hard work from those contributing to them, making them better for everyone to use. And if you're impressed with the effort that goes into these integrations and improvements, then don't forget to hit that like button below. There's some nice quality of life improvements with the notable changes this release, and we start with Matter, and it can now act as a Bluetooth bridge for the Matter server. So those devices that you have that expose their commissioning interface via Bluetooth LE can now be paired even if the server doesn't have a Bluetooth adapter. Added to this, and Matter sirens such as smoke alarms will now expose a proper siren entity that you can switch off via automations and dashboards, which will be certainly something I'll be trying out with the Sensero smoke alarm that I've just reviewed on the channel. Next, and we have a nice little change to the devices table, and we have a new column that you can enable, which is hidden by default, but it will show the firmware version for a device. And if you're using ZHA for your Zigbee devices, well, the group create and edit pages have been updated to now have a more compact card-based layout. So now you don't need to be scrolling through a long table just to find what you need. If you're using labels in Home Assistant, well, now you can search by those in more places, including helpers, automations, and scenes. The backup encryption key, which has always been a bit hidden and out of the way, is now more prominent on the backup settings page, making it hopefully really obvious what you should be doing with that before you need to restore your backup. The Bluetooth section in the settings has been updated to support the changes that are mentioned in the breaking changes section of this video. So if you're using that, then make sure you don't skip that part of the video. However, the changes here will make things clearer, and there's also a new raw advertisement field showing the bytes of the most recent advertisement packet, which should be super helpful when you're debugging a Bluetooth device. The statistics graph card now lets you pick a custom color per entity and therefore brings it in line with the history graph card. And those of you using the energy dashboard with a home battery, well, now you can hook up its state of charge sensor, and the battery node will now show the current charge level amongst other changes. Alongside this is apparently a long requested change, and that is to be able to rename your grid consumption and grid return to something you're more familiar with, like main meter or solar export. With Home Assistant having a lot of related items, it makes sense that the next item has been added to the system, and that is a liberal sprinkling of related links throughout Home Assistant. So when you're on a device, rather than just having the add to automation, scenes or script sections, now you have a related section, and when you click on that, then you can create different automations, scripts and scenes. This has also been added to areas as well, and I'm sure we'll see that end up being added elsewhere as time goes on. Finally, for those that prefer to do everything in YAML, well, now the built-in editor shows inline linting for missing colons, unmatched quotes, and those annoying as anything indentation issues. There's a number of items listed in the breaking changes for this release, so we'll jump straight in, starting with purpose-specific triggers, which is currently still in labs mode, and therefore this is really only going to impact anyone who has enabled it there. With this change, the behavior options have been renamed, so any is now each, and that becomes the default, and last is now changed to all. So if you have automations affected by this, then you just need to open them up and then reselect the behavior option. Next, and we have a change for Bluetooth, and here we see that the default scanning mode has now been changed to auto, and therefore it will dynamically switch between the two scanning modes, therefore reducing battery consumption by about 95%. For most setups, everything should continue to work as is, but if you find that you're encountering problems, then you can go into settings to change it. The certificate expiry sensor error attribute now returns a proper non-value rather than a string equivalent. So if you're using this in templates, then you'll need to update those to is none rather than a string match. And in a similar vein to Bluetooth, the default scanning mode for ESP Home is now also auto. And there's an important point here in that the devices that were previously set as active will be migrated to auto, but passive ones will remain as they are. Again, if you need a specific setting, then you can adjust that in the settings. If you're using the turn off action on HDMI CEC switch or media player entities, then this is now going to send the standard CEC standby command rather than something specific to the vendor, which should make things more reliable across the different manufacturers. However, if you still need to use the original version, then you can do that via the send command action. If you have any automations or dashboards that read the uptime sensor for the Iron OS soldering irons, then you're going to need to update them, as it's now changed from a duration sensor to a timestamp sensor. Those using OMVIF with the security cameras should note that if you're using the PTZ action with a continuous duration of 0, the integration will no longer send a stop command after the continuous move. Therefore, if you have automation set up and you're relying on the camera stopping automatically, you're now going to need to set continuous duration to the number of seconds required. If you have Shelly devices that are being used as Bluetooth scanners, well, now they support the new auto scanning mode as well, and any existing devices that had been set to active will automatically be migrated to auto. As mentioned earlier, this will help with battery performance, but if you need to change it back, then you can do so in settings. Next, and we have SmartThings, and there's a change with this release that sees the source attribute changing to use normalized Home Assistant values. So things like D.in is now digital input and BT is now Bluetooth. If you're using the source attribute in automations or dashboards, then you'll need to be updating those. This next one has been in deprecation for the last 6 months and is now going to be removed, and that is the legacy template syntax. So if you're using the old syntax with things like alarm control panel, fan, lights or switches, etc., and you haven't done so already, then you'll need to update them when you upgrade to this version, and there's a handy step-by-step migration guide available to help you with that. Those using Tuya devices should note that the unit of measurement provided by the Tuya API will now take precedence over the default assigned by Home Assistant, therefore matching what the Tuya app displays. And finally, Velux has had the deprecated reboot gateway action removed, and you should now use the reboot button entity on your gateway instead. So there we go. That's what you can expect to see in the 2026.6 release of Home Assistant. Some nice new features there that I'm sure many of you will be pleased to see. What are you looking forward to in this release? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss more Home Assistant updates like this, as well as all the other smart home content that I create on the channel. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.